I'd just like to welcome everyone to our 7th edition of our Learning Together program here at AeroPM for 2020. And I'd like to welcome Glen Wade-Ferrell for his presentation today on US export controls.
Thank you.
Before I sign it completely across to Glen, I'd just like to point out that the next one of these Learning Together programs is going to be done by Craig Lippman, and it's going to be in relation to review from the perspective of the capability manager on the 7th of September. So if you haven't enrolled in that one yet, please do so as well. Right now, I'm going to hand across to Glen and wish him luck.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for giving up your time this afternoon to come and hear me talk about US export controls. It's a bit of a passionate topic of mine. So we'll get into it. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you're not talking, can I just have you guys put yourselves on mute? Please interrupt at any point, ask questions. If you have to leave, obviously leave, come back if you can. So yeah, please ask questions throughout the presentation. And I believe following the presentation, Rashay will send through the presentation plus the recording, so you guys can have that as reference material. So let's get cracking. Bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about. There's quite a lot to get through. We might jump around a little bit, but I'll just judge how we're going for time, and then we'll test and adjust. But as you can see there, I'll give you a quick blurb on who I am, what we're going to talk about, what we're not going to cover, some key terms, a little bit about US exports, regulations, and why compliance is important. I'll then try to just give you some very basic but very important information about the difference between FMS and DCS procurements of US technology. And then we'll skip through the last couple of topics relatively quickly. They're really there just to be some reference material for you, but we'll talk about tech data, third-party retransfers, and disposal. We'll also wrap up with where you can get help, some training you can do through campus. We'll summarize some of the key takeaways, and then I've got a scenario question. So hopefully you can stick around and help me solve this scenario problem at the end. So just as we go to the next slide, could everybody open up their chat window in Zoom if possible, please? If you don't have it open already, just click chat down the bottom of the screen, I believe it is. Just want to ask you some questions. I just wanted to get an indication from you just in the chat window. When I ask each question, just either a yes or no, or I have not, something like that. Just something basic so I can get a feel for the experience in the room. So first question, who has worked or currently works on a project or a sustainment program that involves US control technology? Okay, that's 100%. It's good. Do you know how that technology was procured? What method it was? Yeah. Okay, I think we're 100% again. That's good. This is good. Do you know the rules which govern the access to that technology that you work with? I won't say who it is, but someone said kinda, so that's good. A couple of no's, so that's good. So hopefully, hopefully this presentation will give you just, even if you take away one nugget that can help you in the future, that'll be great. Do you know who in your organisation that would know how the rules, and do you know where to find them? Okay, sort of a mixed, some mixed answers there, but yeah, some no's, yeses. Someone said they'll bug me for the information. That's interesting. Okay, that's good. And do you know who is allowed access to that technology? Do you know where you would find information that tells you who can and cannot access that technology? Okay, a couple of yeses and nos. Okay, that's good, because this is really important to understand, especially if you're in conversations with non-Commonwealth people who want to access US technology. You need to know whether you can or cannot pass them that technology, be it a physical asset or something intangible. I think I already asked question 6. So thank you for playing that little game. It seems like everyone knows a little bit about the topic. Some people seem to have answered yes to all questions, so that's good. So we'll move on. Thank you. Just some resources where I've got a lot of this information. It's not hard to find. For those not on the DRN or the DPN, the Defence Internet page has some good links there. As I said, you'll get this presentation and I've tried to put all the hyperlinks in there for you so you can just click and go. For the industry folk amongst us, the Australian Guide to Export Controls and Best Practices 2016, that was put together from the Australian Industry Group. Some reps from some of the prime contracts, so that's a really good document, all 154 pages of it. And for those that can access the DPN, I'd strongly advise just going straight to the International Exports and International Export Control and Treaty Internet page. That's the link there. And for those who have been trying to find online some guidance on US export controls, it has been removed, but they advise they will be releasing their latest guidance this month. So keep checking the ISCT website for the updates. So here's a scenario question that I want to just plant in your mind for now, and we're going to come back to this at the end of the presentation. So I'll let you just have a read through it. There's a few dot points there, but essentially you're a project manager, your project's acquiring a piece of kit to fit to multiple land vehicles. The kit is US technology procured via FMS. You need to do some testing, so you've asked DSTG to do some testing to understand the performance characteristics of the kit. DSTG contact you to ask if there's anything they should know before testing. And noting that it's US technology, they need to know whether or not the test results that come out at the end are export controlled. So the 3 questions, if you want to have a think about it while we're going through: what information should you gather? What questions should you ask DSTG? And what advice you would give them? I'm not really after the right answer here. I just wanted to have a chat about, I guess, the thinking and the process and what sort of information you'd be looking at. So a little bit about me. I'm an Aero-Eng grad with 16 years professional experience. 14 of those years was in CASG in the Aerospace Systems Division. Started as essentially a grad as a configuration manager, moved into a technical writing role, writing the C-130J TLS contract statement of work. And then I was a project manager and a project engineer on some Air Force minor and Air Force major projects before my final role, before leaving CASG, was the C-27J commercial manager. That was an FMS program, so a lot of my experience, I guess, is taken from those 6 years in that role, dealing with the FMS program there. I joined AeroPM in February 20, so I've been in the role for about 6 months. I missed a point. Just want to note, I'm not an export control guru. I haven't done any formal qualifications or training here. A lot of this is just on-the-job experience. And I'm currently working in Land 154, Force Protection Electronic Countermeasure section, which is essentially implementing or bringing in a new enhanced countermeasure system for the protected mobility vehicles in the land domain. So what this presentation is my understanding of export controls based on my experience and lessons learned. I'm only going to focus on technology procured via FMS and DCS. There are other procurement methods which we'll talk about in a sec, but I'm not going to address those. It's quite basic information. I've tried to make it as basic, not basic, but I guess as informative and simple to understand as possible, so you know what your responsibilities are when you're handling and managing technology. But I also want to give you the right information, so if you are in a conversation with people about transferring technology, providing access to people, that you can ask the right questions, or you can actively engage in the conversation because you know the lingo. So what the presentation is not, it is not, I'm not going to talk about Australian export controls. I'm not going to address the other procurement types like cooperative programs or treaties. We won't touch on exemptions, exceptions, or technical assistance agreements. They're a whole other presentation in themselves. This is not intended to educate anybody who is in official roles. So in saying that, is anyone in an official export control role that's online? Can either say, put it in the chat or unmute and say yes. That seems like most people are no's. That's good. Bit of a key terms slide for you to reference later. I won't go through all of them. I just wanted to highlight the AECA, the one that's in red, the Arms Export Control Act. The AECA is the overarching legislation that provides the authority to control exports of US defence technology. It also authorises the different regimes for the export of that defence technology. And each regime has their own separate rules, and that's what we're going to discuss in the next few slides. Also, technology down the bottom. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm just bundling technology, the definition there, as equipment and technical data. Although you can have tangible technology and intangible technology, intangible being phone calls, discussions, conversations, things like that. But for the purpose of this presentation, we'll just bundle it together as equipment and technical data. So what is controlled under the US regulations? I'll read this out because I just want to make this clear. US items including hardware, software, technical data on the United States munitions list and the commerce controls list, plus products made from and containing this technology. That's really important, that red bit, and we'll discuss that in more detail as we go through the slides. US technology, services and technical data associated with items on the United States munitions list or the commerce control list, including products developed from this information. Again, that's very important to understand that it's not just the technology itself, it's anything that it touches, is contained, or anything that's derived from that technology. And as I said, we'll touch on that a bit more. Does anybody know the difference between the United States munitions list and the commerce control list? You can type it in the chat window. No bonus points. All right, we'll discuss that again in a bit more detail shortly. I'm pushing everything towards the end, so I hope the climax is worth the wait. So why is compliance important? There's four pretty obvious points there. Maintain our regional security edge, interoperability with the US. It demonstrates that we're trusted by complying with US export rules. And it also ensures our continued access to next generation technology. I used to have a boss that used to say to me, Glenn, there's no such thing as the ITAR police. And I don't think he meant it from a negligent, let's just not follow the rules. I think it was just his understanding that there's no one coming around and checking. It's not quite true. The US embassies do end use checks on their US controlled technology. I'm not aware of any. Is anybody aware of their project or program being audited by the embassy to check on their US technology? So yeah, Amber said that's the role of the Office of Defence Cooperation Cell. Okay, there you go. So I didn't know that. But the part that got me the most was he said there's no ITAR police, and we were in an FMS program. And this is where I said before, using the terminology is very important because ITAR and FMS are not the same, and we'll address that in a second. But the key message here about compliance is that serious or consistent non-compliance can damage our reputation and our ability to access next generation technology and can have future consequences on our defence capability in the future. US export controls, just a quick slide here. Over 60% of our inventory is sourced from the US. This is a good point. The US controls items exported from the US for the entirety of an item's life. So from the point of manufacture all the way through to disposal, you must manage and handle that item according to the relevant US export controls. And that is wherever the item is located. US export controls go beyond the approval from the US to Australia, and this includes accessing that technology by third parties within Australia, so non-Commonwealth entities or individuals. It also includes individual employee access through the dual and third country national policy and the re-export of controlled technology. For the purposes of time, I'm just going to focus on third party retransfers in this presentation. I won't touch on the dual third country national policy or the re-export of controlled technology. So how is US technology acquired? Each procurement is subject to its own regulatory regime. As I mentioned before, the Arms Export Control Act sets those regimes for each of the procurement types. And for us, it's foreign military sales, direct commercial sales, cooperative programs, or the US-Australia Defence Trade Corporation Treaty. I won't be discussing co-op programs or Defence Trade Cooperation Treaty because I have no experience in that space. And again, there's no time here to talk about that. But the key point to take away here is the procurement method determines the re-export or the retransfer licensing requirements. Here's an image or a flow chart that my old team put together. A few years back, I said to my team, I want a simple way of explaining to people how we need to control the technology associated with our program, but also for our commercial team to understand the quickest way to get what we needed to in terms of transferring technology to our prime and subcontractors. It's a little bit dated, but I believe the information is still correct. So what you can see there from the top down, it starts with the US item itself, and that answers the question about how do we procure it, and then it goes through who controls it, who's it regulated by, and how it can be transferred. The next few slides will break that down in a bit more detail, so it's a bit clearer for people. I can't find, as you can see, this is a scan of something that was up on a wall. We can't find the original, but we're still looking for it. If you notice off to the side there, it talks about the return transfer to the OEM. We're not going to touch on that, but essentially returning US controlled technology procured via FMS can be done under an ITAR exemption or the use of an export classification control number. But again, we'll leave that for now because there's not enough time. This is something I really wanted to make clear in the presentation. I've called it myth bust. I'm not sure if that's the right reference, but the FMS program is not governed by the ITAR. So for the last however many years working on the C27J program, the amount of time people referred to the C27J as ITAR controlled was phenomenal. And the fact that we purchased that via FMS really made that statement incorrect. And it is all about terminology, and we need to get it right when we're engaging with other people, either contractors or other defence, I guess, family, when we're talking about how our technology that we're working on is controlled. So for the engineers out there, I've got a formula. FMS does not equal ITAR. For those who love reading the ITAR, if you want to go and have a look, there's a link there to 126.6, and that is where it provides the exemption that a license is not required for exports under the FMS program. So what is FMS? I'm assuming most people have a general idea, and this is really just a high level take on what a foreign military sale procurement is. But for those who may be not super familiar, it's a government to government arrangement. The Australian government approaches the US government by submitting what's called a letter of requirement, obviously details what we're looking for or what we want to buy. We then contract with the Australian government, who goes out and acquires that technology from the US OEM or supplier on our behalf. So the Australian government has no contractual relationship with the US OEM or supplier. The FMS program is governed by the Arms Export Control Act. I believe Section 3 is the main section there. It's administered by the Department of State, and the office there is the Regional Security and Arms Transfer Office. Once the requirement is locked down and we know what we're going to buy, we sign a contract which is known as a letter of offer and acceptance. And that outlines the technology that we're going to buy and provides the license for the export, plus all the other terms and conditions for the sale and end use of that technology. There's a couple of comments over here I might just quickly read. Is the relatively new exemption added to for cooperative programs? Okay, excellent. Thanks, Brett. And that last point there, transfer to anyone other than the US or Australian government officials requires US government authorization. And we'll talk about that in a bit more detail soon. So FMS, government to government arrangement, governed by the AECA, administered by ARSAT, and the license and transfer is via the letter of offer and acceptance. So moving out to direct commercial sales, this is the purchase of technology direct from the OEM or supplier. So Australian government contracts directly with the OEM or supplier. This technology could either be procured from the United States munitions list, which is ITAR controlled, or the Commerce Control List, which is Export Administration Regulation controlled. For those who aren't familiar, I think there was some no's before about the differences. The USML is technology that is military in design. It has a specific military purpose and does not have any civilian application. So I'm sure you could think of a few examples, but electronic weapon systems, certain secret communication systems, etc., for our platforms. Whereas the Commerce Control List, on the other hand, it's technology that either has a pure civilian use, a mixed civilian and military use, or it has a pure military use, but the technology is being assessed as not warranted for control under the ITAR. So in this instance, you can talk about engine types and generic aircraft navigation equipment. Again, I've put two links there to the USML and the Commerce Control List web pages if you'd like to go and check that out at some point. So looking at DCS, so direct commercial sale of items that are on the United States munition list, these items are subject to control under the ITAR. So when people say, oh, that's ITAR controlled, this is what they're talking about. It's technology specifically listed on the United States munitions list. It's administered from the Department of State, like the FMS program, but from a different office, the Directorate of Defence Trade Controls. Here, authorization or exemption is required for the re-transfer or re-export, and that we'll get into the details of how that happens shortly, but like a third-party re-transfer. But the key point here is, even if you've procured something that is on the United States munitions list, if you procured that via the FMS program, it remains subject to the FMS transfer rules, being a letter of offer and acceptance, or the third-party re-transfer process. So for items that are on the Commerce Control List, these items are subject to the control under the Export Administration Regulations. They are administered outside of the US Department of State by the Department of Commerce. And the office there is the Bureau of Industry and Security. I believe the link, the little logo down the right-hand side is attached. There's a link there so you can take you to the BIS website within the Department of Commerce. And I think the previous slide too has a link here to the DDTC website for future reference. I just want to read something here because I think it's very important. For items that are Commerce Control List, the Department of Commerce has adopted a catch and release approach to the items under the control of the EAR. This means that all items that are not listed on the USML are captured by the CCL, and then through a wide selection of exceptions that are to be applied can then be released for further licensing. So essentially everything is on either the USML or the Commerce Control List. The third dot point there has in blue the ECCN, the Export Classification Control Number. All items on the Commerce Control List have an ECCN, and that is a 5-digit alphanumeric code that describes the item and indicates the licensing and control requirements. The ECCN is very useful because it can help you determine whether an export license is needed, and it's a much simpler process to work out and to process a transfer or to get a license to transfer that, as opposed to something that is on the USML or something that is FMS acquired. So that's a quick and dirty through, I guess, the FMS and 2 different DCS procurement types. I like little tables that I guess compare, so you can print this out and use this for reference later. But essentially, you've got the 3 different procurement types: government to government. The top line being how you're acquiring it. The second one is who's governing it. The third one is the office that looks after it. And the fourth is the transfer requirements, being a LOA, TPR, TAA is Technical Assistance Agreement, DSP is I've just had a blank, Defence Service Publication. It's another type of license to export control technology. So I probably ran through that relatively quickly, but the title of the presentation being attempting to clear the water between FMS and DCS. That was my attempt at doing it. I hope it either provided something new that you didn't know, or maybe cleared things up for you, or maybe just reaffirmed your understanding. Before I move on any further, does anyone have any questions about the 2 different procurement types there, being FMS and DCS? No? Excellent. Okay, I just want to talk about FMS or ITAR infection. No, it's not a disease. It's a term that I've heard used many times, so I've just continued using it myself. But essentially, what this means is that there is no de minimis for FMS or ITAR items when it comes to infection of Australian products or technology. Now, does anyone know what I mean by de minimis? Can they unmute and talk and let us know? No? Claude says no. Okay, no worries. It's my job to explain it. So essentially, and I guess the second dot point answers that there, if an FMS or ITAR control item or technology is attached to a non-FMS or ITAR controlled piece of equipment, then the whole thing becomes either FMS or ITAR controlled. So I'm sorry, that's quite a lot of acronyms and words in there, but essentially, if US technology is attached to a piece of Australian technology, and that technology is FMS or ITAR controlled, then the whole thing is. Now that is slightly different to items that are on the commerce control list. They do have a de minimis regime, which basically says, hope I get this right, it's based on the total dollar value of that item within the greater system. And if it's below a certain percentage of the total value, then there is a de minimis about what licensing is or is not required. So in this instance, if something is FMS or ITAR controlled, it's attached to something that, say it's an Australian product that isn't, the whole thing is then becomes ITAR or FMS infected. And this also applies to documentation like technical publications, things like that. This is a bit of a good segue to the next topic on derived technical data. Again, this is a term that I've heard used many times, so I've continued to use it. I don't believe it's a defined term, but most technology that we buy from the US will include the transfer of some technical data. The definition that I've come up with for derived technical data is data developed from the US export control technology or services or tech data. Now, I guess the fact that it has, I guess this data has been generated from something that we acquired from the US doesn't necessarily mean that that data is now export controlled. What we need to do is we need to do a test on that data to determine whether or not that also needs to be export controlled. So before transferring that data that you've produced from the US export controlled item, we need to review the definition in the ITARs for technical data. And again, there's a link there to 120.10, which gives a definition for what technical data is. I'll just quickly read it out. Technical data is information other than software, which is required for the design, development, production, manufacture, assembly, operation, repair, test, maintenance, or modification of defence articles. It includes blueprints, drawings, photographs, plans, instructions, or documentation. So what we do is we do a test of our data that we've produced from the US technology. And if our data meets that definition, then that data is also export controlled, and it must be marked accordingly, stored accordingly, and I guess access to third parties needs to be managed accordingly as well. So if the data is being used to design something, develop, produce, manufacture, assemble, operate, repair, test, maintain, or modify the original defence article, then that data will be export controlled. This slide's just focuses mainly on the markings of US control technology. So the US export controls regulations mandate the strict storage, handling, marking, and record keeping practices. And most of you will be aware, or you've seen, the technology that we handle and use is usually marked with one of these three markings, depending on how it was procured. So US export controlled being FMS, EAR controlled being DCS off the Commerce Control List, or ITAR controlled for technology procured off the USML. The next comment there, US export controlled items documentation incorporated into Australian equipment or documents. So I know for the C27J, we had our publications, and we started incorporating amendments that were from the FMS case. We had to ensure that the front of those publications were marked accordingly to represent that that they were US export controlled, because we procured them from via FMS. The last point there is, it's a bit of a throwaway. It just says you should create a technology control plan. Does anybody know what a technology control plan is? Have they written one? Has anyone read one? Yep. No. Okay, a couple of yeses, nos. I've read many, that's good. So for those who don't know, a technology control plan is used to identify, manage, and control the US source defence articles and tech data related to the technology that the ADF has acquired. The TCP details any US, Australian, or other export control requirements. It describes how we will manage the defence articles and related tech data, including how we're going to manage access to third parties. And it supports the project in ensuring the Commonwealth meets the US export control obligations placed on it. There's a really good, very short document there that I've provided a link to at the bottom, which gives this information in about 1 or 2 pages on how to do this. There's also a link on the web, on the IECT webpage for a technology control plan template. Third-party retransfers. For those who aren't, question, how many people have either put together a third-party retransfer application? How many people have read one? How many people have never seen one, never put one together? Yes, agree, Brett. They can be very painful. Yes, agree, Adrian. Pain to put together. Yeah. I scientific letters frequently. Excellent. Okay, so it sounds like everyone understands, and my point here is going to be, it is a lengthy process to get a third-party retransfer application developed. And then, as it says there, only the COA can apply for the TPR approval, which can take up to 3 months to get an approval back from the Department of State. So a third-party retransfer is only for items procured via FMS or DCS. So I guess the takeaway message here is that planning with your contractors is very important early to understand what the future requirement of your program or project is for transferring technology to third parties. So you can get in early and do a third-party retransfer that incorporates all of those companies. An example here where planning would have helped us, on the C27J, we had some belly skin issues and we needed to respray the belly skin. The company that we identified to do that respraying for us was not on a third-party retransfer approval. However, these aeroplanes were grounded subject to this painting being completed. I can't remember if it took 90 days, but we had to wait until we had this company on a third-party retransfer approval before we could send them to the contractor to get painted. So you can imagine we had a few aircraft sitting on the runway, not flying, so not delivering capability until that TPR was approved. So setting up a workshop with your prime contractors early in the piece, or along the way to reevaluate where you're at is very helpful in identifying who may need access to this technology down the track. Just on the TPRs, they can be amended. You can add additional parties to the TPR through an amendment process. It can take up to 90 days, but from my experience, we've had some done in 20 days, 30 days, if you're just adding a party to that TPR. And a bit of this is, I guess, another slight myth. I was always advised that TPR amendments cannot be made after 12 months. That is only true if you're trying to amend a third-party retransfer to add new technology or to change the scope. If you're just changing the listed companies because you've identified we need to use X contractor to do some servicing or maintenance, that amendment can be done well after 12 months of when the original TPR was approved. So keep that in mind. But yes, early planning and identification of third parties is very important. Disposal. As I said at the very beginning, US export controls exist for the entirety of the item's life, and that covers disposal. Has anyone had the opportunity to dispose of US controlled technology at all? There's a question there from Brett about, do TPRs have an expiry? Yes, I believe in the questionnaire, which is one of the attachments to the main document pack, you put in there when you want the, how long you want the access for. Okay, lots of no's there. Okay. Well, hopefully you're aware now that a US controlled item needs to be managed all the way through the disposal process. So you need to understand what authorizations are required before you go through that process. For items that are FMS or DCS acquired that are on the United States munitions list, you definitely will need a third-party retransfer application. For those that are a bit more interested in this disposal activity, the IEC&T have a disposal fact sheet on their website, and you can click on that link and that'll take you to it. I believe you may have to be on the DPN for that fact sheet, so you might have to copy and paste the link into an email and email it to your defence address. The key takeaway here is record keeping is very important. If you are disposing of technology that is either FMS or DCS acquired, you need to know of all of those serial numbers that you're trying to dispose of, which ones were procured FMS and DCS. This issue arose a few years back when we went to dispose of the P3 Orion T56 engines. They were a mixed fleet of engines that were procured via FMS and some that were procured directly from the OEM. It was a very, I wasn't involved, but from the people that were, it was a very difficult and lengthy process to figure out which ones were procured FMS and which ones were DCS. So record keeping is really important here, and with Objective, hopefully that can make things easier. We're not trying to find paper copies of documentation. So where can you get help? The International Export Control and Treaty team down in Canberra, there's their contact details and a phone number. like some of the other specialist sections within defence, these guys are under-resourced but heavily tasked, but they're a lovely bunch of people, and I really encourage you to reach out to them and make contact, and I guess speak with them at all times throughout any of these processes you go through for acquiring technology, wanting to retransfer, etc. For ADF, APS people, your CASG commercial or contract managers can be a good source of information as well. And for industry, likewise, your company's contract commercial managers, or if some of you are lucky enough to have your own export control officers, they would definitely be buying them a coffee. Training, I'm not aware of too much training other than the campus course, Navigating US Export Controls. That's actually quite a good course, only takes about an hour to do, but really does give you a good high-level view of the US export control process. And more recently, the IEC and T team have been doing export control overview and EAR presentation on GovTeams. I sat through the EAR one last week, and it was very informative. So please go and check their website. They have a schedule, and then you can, I guess, put your registration in, similar to what you did for this meeting today. Is anyone aware of any other formal training in this space outside of campus and defence training that they've done? AIDN has run export control training for industry. Okay. Excellent. All right, we're getting close. Some takeaways, there's quite a few there, but I thought some of these were really important. So I won't read through all of them. I'll let you do that in your own time, but I'll just pick out a couple that I think are really important. Compliance. Compliance ensures continued access to next generation technology. So we really need to understand the process, understand the regimes, FMS, DCS, etc., and make contact with our IEC team for their assistance. Always know that the technology that you're working with and how it was procured. Remember, FMS does not equal ITAR. These are different regimes. There's no de minimis for Australian technology, which is infected with FMS ITAR technology. Remember, if it has one widget that's FMS procured, the whole higher assembly is then controlled. Write a tech control plan. If you don't have one, please visit the ICT website to get I think there's a fact sheet on technology control plans plus a template. Third-party retransfers take time, they're lengthy. Planning is very important with your contractors and subcontractors. And please contact IEC and T. Make friends with them because you will need them every step of the way when you're going through putting third-party retransfer applications together, etc. So that is the end of the education part. I wanted to run through a scenario, and I was hoping I could get people to talk or even type through providing some answers to some of the questions there in red. So just refreshing, you're the PM, you're acquiring a piece of kit via FMS to fit to land vehicles. You want DSTG to do some testing so you can understand the performance and from a vehicle integration point of view. DSTG contact you to ask if there's anything they should know before they start their testing, and they want to know the outputs from testing. How are they to be treated from an export control perspective? So what information should you gather? Does anyone want to talk or type and tell us what type of information we should start to gather? No one's keen. No. Okay. I'll give the answer. Any contact on their team? Yep, that's 100%. So we should know who the company is that we're we should know who is working in DSTG. Is it all Commonwealth, or do they have contracted support in there? Who are they, and whether or not they're on a current third-party retransfer. Yep, is the technology controlled? Where did we procure? We procured it via FMS. So then we can understand, right, we can go and have a look at the letter of offer and acceptance. We can have a look at the exact technology, the purpose for which the end use for which we acquired it, and any other T's and C's. So this is just some notes that I put together on here. Confirm the purpose of the testing with DSTG. We just want to tell them that it's to understand the performance of the technology. If it was to improve it, to go back and improve it, then that would have another implication, and we'll address that in a second. You can go back and review the definition of technical data to see whether or not the test results would be export controlled. As we only want to use the data to understand the performance of the system, we don't want to go back and improve it. It's likely that we don't meet that definition for technical data. Therefore, the test results are unlikely to be export controlled. I might have just given away the answer. But as Adrienne said, what export retransfer approvals are currently in place? Read the LOA and check your existing third-party retransfer register. So what about question 2? What questions would you ask DSTG in your fact-finding or information gathering stage? Yep, does DSTG require access to ITAR data, or can the testing be done without this? Yep, that's good.
Hey Glenn, it's Steve.
Hey Steve.
Mate, first of all, great presentation. You've covered a lot of great topics here. Okay. For me here, I'd also be looking to ask about what their test plan is, and given your, is it non-de minimis? I've never heard of that before.
Yep.
And obviously seeking to understand what else they're going to connect their controlled item to, and make sure that's obviously brought into the planning for that particular activity. So
yep.
It's something I wasn't aware of. So I think that's something I'll be certainly looking to understand from DSTG in this particular scenario.
Yeah, very good. And one thing I'm not covering here, because I'm focusing purely on export controls, is the security side and the intellectual property side. So they won't be ignored. I'm just not talking about them at this point. But yes, this is actually a real life example that happened only a few weeks back. And Adrienne, who's on the line here, her and I worked through this process to understand exactly what we needed to do and what information we needed to provide to understand whether or not the test results here were going to be export controlled. So, so I had written down here questions: who will be controlling and accessing the technology when it's with DSTG? Steve made a very good point there. What's this technology going to be attached to, connected to, touching? If DSTG advise they have contractors, we then have to do that TPR check process. If that company is not on a TPR, we need to start the whole application or amendment process, which could be up to 3 months. So you can see how that can really hurt your schedule if you go into an activity and not knowing whether or not that company, or they're going to be using contractors who aren't on a third-party retransfer. And what does the outputs look like, of this testing? So you can get an idea of exactly what information is going to be shared or available. Adrian says, ask if they need to copy export control data and put that in their documentation. Yep. Okay. And the third question, what advice would you give to DSTG? I might just go straight to the answer for the interest of time. Without boring them to tears too much, I would advise them how the technology was procured and the export control implications there. So I would say, just so you're aware, this was procured FMS. We have a letter of offer and acceptance from the US government, which outlines the technology plus the terms and conditions for the end use and transfer of that technology. We would tell them that being it's FMS, the access is limited to the Commonwealth only, unless they have people previously approved on a third-party retransfer approval. And the last dot point there, explain what your project's intent is with the test results. Should we want to use the data to modify and improve the system? As I mentioned before, it's likely it'll be export controlled. But in this instance, we really just want to understand the performance of the system so we can consider the integration aspects as we put this piece of kit into a vehicle. So from that instance, it doesn't meet the ITAR definition for tech data. Therefore, the test results from this activity would not be export controlled. They may still be subject to security control and IP, but from an export control perspective, they are not considered export controlled. So that brings us to the end of the formal presentation. I'd like to open up to questions and answers. Questions. I'll give the answers if I can. So please turn on your mic or type a question if you have any. Going once. No.
Yeah, I'll have a go. Brett Wyman here.
Hey, Brett.
G'day. It's more of just, I guess, a bit of experience from my point of view in terms of TCPs and I guess technology control registers that would fit underneath it. I guess I've been in majors and transitioned into sustainment where a lot of the time going back and understanding the licensing and technology control has been an afterthought to transition to the sustainment SPO, and that's sort of like a risk area in not providing all those licenses and TPRs and the like that are established in acquisition over to sustainment. So that's just for me, how important that TCP is and as you said, sort of controlling cradle to grave controlled items. The other one was, I guess, changing sustainment frameworks. So some of our products come in through FMS and get sustained FMS up front until you transition to a TLS framework that might be DCS, and your whole ITAR framework or your technology control framework might change at that point. So it's just another sort of gotcha that I've seen cause issues in the past.
C27J, I think, was exactly that. We had the interim, what do you call it? The interim support contractor was L3 in Texas. We transitioned out of that to Northrop Grumman under the through life support contract. But a lot of the I guess the topic here and the information is the lessons learned there is we didn't put a technology control plan in place early enough. Air 8000 had one from a acquisition perspective, and we were able to read that and I guess contribute to it. However, we didn't put one in place for sustainment, and I think that it would have, in hindsight, it would have been very beneficial for us to do that earlier in the piece. And on the technology control plan front, we have one for Land 154 at the moment. And Adrian, who's online, I think, we're just gone back and looked at really boosting that with some of this information because we feel like it's missing some of that cradle to grave type information and really around the licensing TPR aspects. So if you do have one, please go and have a read with some of the information that I've presented today. Cross-check it and see if your technology control plan is giving you that information. Some question, what are ways a project can make sure the TPR approved companies are using export control data properly? I guess the TCP helps. Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, and somebody mentioned another organisation that's doing these audits, the US Embassy does do end-use audits on the US controlled technology. So that's one way that they all kept honest, but it's a reputation and some of the consequences for, I guess, for financial penalties are quite large should any of these companies be found to be breaching the US export control regulations. I can't remember the exact example, but I believe it was Raytheon many years ago had some significant breaches, and I think multiple breaches, and they had a tens of millions of dollar fine issued to them for that breach. And you can imagine what that does for their future business from a reputation perspective, because they're not a trusted partner. So having a technology control plan is one thing, but it's also the Commonwealth's responsibility to work with and educate our prime contractors so they understand exactly the rules and requirements for handling, managing, storing transferring access to the technology. Thanks, Paul. Excellent. Alrighty, that's right about on time. Any last calls for questions? Otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance. Thanks for your participation and answering some questions and playing along. As I mentioned, Rashay will make this available, the presentation via email, and also I think a link to the video presentation if you ever want to come back and hear my voice again. So thank you very much again.